All right, so get this. Today, we're going to deep dive into something pretty wild. We're talking about engineering sleep.
Yeah, like what if we could, I don't know, safely reduce how much sleep we need, without turning into like total zombies?
Exactly. That's what we're going to explore today. And our starting point is this group of people who seem to have already, cracked the code.
Right. Individuals with familial natural short sleep, FNSS, it's called.
FNSS, okay.
And these folks naturally just sleep way less than the average person.
Hmm.
But they're not just like getting by, they're thriving.
So wait, hold on. Are they, superhuman or something? We're always told to get 8 hours of sleep. What makes these FNSS people so different?
Well, researchers think it all comes down to the efficiency of their sleep. It's not just about sleeping less. It's about like really maximizing those hours.
So they're like sleep ninjas.
Yeah, kind of. Like, imagine you could pack all the good stuff of an 8-hour sleep cycle into, say, 6 hours. You'd still get all the benefits.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. But what's the secret sauce? Is it all in their genes?
Genetics definitely plays a big role. Scientists have actually zeroed in on this gene called DEC2 that's linked to FNSS.
DEC2, okay.
And there's this specific mutation in that gene. It's called DEC2P384R. Seems to be the real game changer here. This mutation, it messes with the production of a neurotransmitter called orexin.
Orexin. Now that sounds familiar. Isn't that like the wakefulness signal in our brain?
Yeah, exactly. Like, think of it as the gas pedal for your brain. Keeps you alert and awake.
Got it. So people with FNSS just have their orexin levels cranked up all the time.
Not necessarily. It's not quite that straightforward. They do have higher orexin levels, but it's more about like the timing and dynamics of it all.
So it's not just about flooring the gas pedal, but knowing when to ease up and when to hit the brakes.
Exactly. And you know what's really fascinating? Scientists have been studying orexin for ages, especially in relation to sleep disorders like narcolepsy.
Right, where people are excessively sleepy during the day.
Yeah, and insomnia, where people, well, they can't sleep.
Right. And I remember reading somewhere that narcolepsy is linked to low orexin, while insomnia is often associated with high orexin, right?
Yeah, so here's the million-dollar question. If FNSS individuals and insomniacs both have elevated orexin, why are their experiences so different? Shouldn't they both have trouble sleeping?
Right. That doesn't seem to make sense. What's the deal there?
Well, it probably comes down to this really complicated interplay of different factors. It's not just about how much orexin you have,
Hmm.
but also, like I said, the timing and the way it's released.
So it's like a delicate dance.
Exactly. Plus, people with FNSS, they might have developed other adaptations to deal with their higher orexin levels.
Interesting.
Like their brains might have fine-tuned some other processes to make sure they get enough of that really restorative sleep, even with that, amped up wakefulness signal.
So it's like their bodies have found a workaround. Okay, so we've got this genetic mutation, this orexin puzzle. It's getting pretty complex. But the big question is, could we somehow replicate this FNSS thing? Could we engineer shorter, more efficient sleep for everyone? Is that even a possibility?
Well, scientists are actually looking into a couple of different pathways that could potentially unlock that possibility. The first one involves these medications called orexin agonists. They basically mimic the effect of that FNSS mutation by activating those orexin receptors in the brain.
So it's like giving our brains a pharmacological wake-up call. Interesting. What's the other pathway?
The other one involves gene therapy. Scientists are exploring how to use these things called adeno-associated virus vectors, or AAVs, to deliver that DEC2P384R gene directly to the neurons.
Hold on, gene therapy. That sounds kind of like rewriting the code of our DNA, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, in a way it is. But the type of gene therapy they're looking at is called the episomal expression. Basically, the modified gene just hangs out outside the cell's regular DNA, so it wouldn't get passed down to kids or anything. It's more like installing a software update than like messing with the hardware itself.
Okay, that makes me feel a bit better. But like with any new tech, there are going to be challenges, right?
Mhm.
What are some of the concerns with these approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. With the orexin agonists, we don't really know yet if boosting orexin is enough to copy all the benefits of FNSS. And then there's the question of long-term effects, like what happens if we just constantly stimulate those orexin receptors? Could it lead to tolerance, side effects, or even withdrawal issues? We just don't know yet.
That makes sense. What about the gene therapy approach? What are the unknowns there?
Well, one big question is whether expressing that mutation in adulthood would even work. And then there's always the possibility of unintended consequences. We know DEC2 is involved with sleep, but it probably affects other stuff too.
So Messing with one gene could have a domino effect throughout the body, impacting things we haven't even considered yet.
Precisely. It's just a reminder that we're dealing with a really complex system here, and any changes we make could have some unintended consequences. It's definitely not as simple as flipping a switch and turning everyone into short sleepers.
I see what you mean. It sounds like there's still a lot more research to do before we can confidently claim FNSS for all. But I gotta admit, the possibilities are really mind-blowing. Imagine a world where we could safely reduce our sleep needs by even an hour or two. Think of what we could achieve with that extra time.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-boggling, isn't it? And it's not just about individual productivity either. Think about the huge societal impact of sleep deprivation. Like millions of people are chronically sleep deprived, and it affects their health, their well-being, and even their ability to work effectively. Giving those people back those lost hours could be revolutionary.
Absolutely. It's like unlocking this hidden reservoir of human potential. We could achieve so much more, experience more, and maybe even live longer, healthier lives.
Yeah, it's really a captivating thought. But before we get too carried away, let's take a step back and think about this fascinating evolutionary puzzle. If FNSS is so beneficial, why is it so incredibly rare? You'd think natural selection would favor those who could thrive on less sleep, giving them a competitive advantage.
Right. That's a great point. It does seem kind of counterintuitive. If short sleep with no negative effects is such a winning formula, you'd think it would be more common. So, what's the explanation for that?
Well, one possible answer lies in something called the Fisher-Wright model from population genetics. It basically suggests that in small, isolated populations, even potentially harmful mutations can hang around for a while. Like they might appear neutral for a few generations just because of chance.
So, you're saying the downsides of the FNSS mutation might be masked because the group of people carrying it is so small and we just haven't studied them long enough?
Exactly. We might not be seeing the full picture yet. There could be some subtle negative effects that don't show up until later in life, or maybe under certain conditions that we haven't discovered yet.
So, there could be a delayed cost to shorter sleep, a trade off we haven't noticed because we haven't been looking for it. That's pretty thought provoking.
Right. It's a lot to consider.
It is. So even though the research is still in its early stages, it's clear that the quest to engineer sleep is raising some really big questions. What does it even mean to sleep well? And if we could safely reduce our sleep needs, what would we do with those extra hours? Would we work more, spend more time with our families, learn new things?
Those are questions each of us will need to grapple with as research progresses. It's a brave new world out there, with both exciting possibilities and some potential pitfalls.
For sure. But to get a better grasp on all of this, we need to go beyond just the science. We need to hear from the people who are already living with shorter sleep. Whether it's natural or by choice, their experiences can give us valuable insights.
Absolutely. Let's hear from some real people who have firsthand experience with short sleep and see what lessons we can learn.
You know, it's really fascinating to think about how all these personal stories, like, they might actually shape the whole future of sleep. Remember that comment we saw from that person who claims to be a natural short sleeper? The one who wakes up at 4.25 every morning without an alarm?
Oh, yeah, yeah. The one who said they feel worse if they sleep longer than 6 hours. Yeah, that's definitely not me.
Right. And they were saying they actually feel like groggy and jet lagged if they sleep in, even on weekends. It's wild. They even track their sleep, and they consistently log a sleep efficiency of 98%.
98%. Wow, that's incredible.
It is. And they actually credit their short sleep pattern with, like, increased productivity, tons of energy. And they also do intermittent fasting. They think that helps their cognitive function, too.
Okay, so they've definitely found a system that works for them. But you're right, it's just one person. We can't assume everyone would have the same experience with such limited sleep.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's totally possible that this person's sleep patterns are just a quirk of their own biology.
Yeah.
It might not even be related to FNSS, but it does show just how much variation there is in people's sleep needs and what they prefer. And it raises a really interesting question. Could we all potentially optimize our sleep?
Yeah.
Even if it's within what's considered the normal range?
It's like we're all trying to solve the same equation, but with totally different variables. What works for one person might not work for another. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, right? Which brings us back to those potential pathways for engineering sleep. Like, where are we at with the actual research? What's going on there?
Well, it's still early days, but there have been some pretty interesting developments. You know that research group at UCSF, the one that identified that DEC2P384R mutation?
Yeah.
They've been doing some experiments with transgenic mice. They've actually edited the mice genomes to include that human mutation.
So they basically created mice with the potential for shorter sleep. That's crazy. Did it work? Like, what happened?
Well, they did see a reduction in sleep time in these mice, like about 1 to 2 hours less than the mice without the modification.
Oh, whoa. So they actually induced a form of FNSS in mice. That's incredible. So does this mean we're like one step closer to engineering sleep in humans?
It's definitely a promising step, but it's important to remember that what we see in animals doesn't always translate perfectly to humans. Humans are way more complex, and there are often differences in how our bodies respond to these kinds of modifications, like genetic modifications or even drug interventions. Plus, this study, they only observed the mice for 24 hours. So we don't really know if that reduced sleep was sustainable, like over their whole lifespan, or if there were any long-term health consequences.
Right. So we need way more data before we can really see the whole picture. And it makes sense to be cautious, before jumping from animal studies to humans. But what about human trials? Has anyone done any research to specifically test the effects of engineered sleep in people?
With gene editing. Not that we know of, no. The research on humans is really just getting started. But remember those orexin agonists we talked about before? The medications that activate the orexin receptors.
Oh, right, right. The ones that sort of mimic the effects of that FNSS mutation.
Exactly. Well, those are currently in clinical trials. But the main focus right now is on treating things like narcolepsy and hypersomnia, not really on reducing sleep needs in the general population.
Got it. So even though these trials aren't directly aimed at, like, engineering sleep, they could still give us some valuable insights into the long-term effects of messing with the orexin system.
Yeah, for sure. We can learn a lot by studying how these medications impact sleep patterns, alertness, and overall health in people with sleep disorders. And then we can use that information to guide future research on engineered sleep for, everyone else.
So it's like piecing together a puzzle, gathering information from all these different places to really understand what's going on. But speaking of puzzles, we still have that big evolutionary question from before. If shorter sleep is so beneficial, why haven't we all evolved to be short sleepers? Like, what are we missing here?
It's a question that's been bugging scientists for a while. You'd think that with natural selection and all that, the people who could thrive on less sleep would have a huge advantage. Like they'd have more time for everything else they need to do to survive and reproduce.
Right, it seems like a no-brainer. So why are short sleepers still so uncommon?
Well, one theory is that there could be some hidden downsides to short sleep,
Yeah.
even people with FNSS. Maybe those downsides are just really subtle and they only show up later in life. Or maybe they only appear under certain conditions that we haven't figured out yet. It's like a ticking time bomb. We just haven't fully understood it yet.
So it could be like a delayed reaction, a trade-off that hasn't been revealed because we just haven't been looking for it. What else could be going on?
Well, another possibility is that there are other trade-offs that we haven't thought about. Maybe short sleepers are amazing at certain things, but not so great at others. Like, remember that saying, jack of all trades, master of none? Maybe having a longer sleep duration allows for a more balanced set of skills and a wider range of adaptations, which makes us more resilient as a species.
So it's like evolution has found this perfect sweet spot, a sleep duration that gives us the best chance of survival and success overall, even if it means giving up a little bit of extra time awake.
Exactly. And messing with that balance could have consequences we don't even know about. We need to be really careful as we explore this whole idea of engineered sleep.
I hear you. It's a good reminder that we're still just starting to learn about all the complexities of sleep, and there's so much we don't know yet. But I gotta say, this whole deep dive has been so interesting, and I bet our listeners are hooked too.
I hope so. It's really exciting stuff, and I hope it encourages people to think more critically about their own relationship with sleep. It's not just about how many hours you get, but about the quality, consistency, and figuring out what works best for you personally.
It's about taking control of your sleep and seeing it as a crucial part of your overall well-being. Speaking of personal experiences, I'm really curious about some of the comments from our listeners. One person talked about how they used to try and hack their sleep back in college. They were trying to survive on as little sleep as possible so they could cram in more socializing, gaming, and studying.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. The one who regrets being so sleep-deprived back then, especially now that they have a super demanding job and little kids who don't sleep through the night.
Exactly. It goes to show you, we might think we're invincible when we're younger, but those choices can really come back to bite us later on.
Yeah, sleep debt is no joke. It
Hmm.
can really mess you up. Like, it can show up as decreased cognitive function, mood swings, and even an increased risk of chronic diseases.
It's like you're constantly overdrawing from your energy bank, and sooner or later you're going to have to pay the price. But what about those situations where you just can't avoid sacrificing sleep? Like, we had a listener who wrote in about those overnight deployments working 12 to 14-hour days. That's a whole other level of sleep deprivation.
Yeah, those situations are definitely tough. And they raise some important questions about how we can better support people in professions that demand that kind of sleep sacrifice. Maybe engineered sleep could actually offer a solution, like a way to reduce the negative effects of sleep deprivation in those really crucial fields.
Right. Imagine being able to function at your peak even after a night of limited sleep. It would be huge for healthcare workers, first responders, military personnel, new parents, the list goes on and on.
It's a really fascinating possibility and shows how engineered sleep could be about more than just productivity. It could be about resilience, safety, and well-being in situations where sleep just isn't an option.
So it's not just about getting more done, it's about optimizing our ability to function well and stay safe no matter what's going on around us. Which brings us back to that fundamental question. What is the true value of sleep?
It's a question that goes way beyond just the number of hours. What about the quality of our sleep?
You're right. We get so caught up in that whole 8 hours rule that we forget sleep is this incredibly complex process. And all those different stages contribute to our overall well being.
Absolutely. We've got deep sleep, which is essential for like physical repair and recovery, REM sleep, which is super important for processing emotions and consolidating memories,
Yeah.
and then there's light sleep, which acts as this transition between the stages. And each stage has a unique function, right?
And if any of those stages get messed up, it can throw off our whole system. It can impact everything: mood, energy levels, immune function, cognitive abilities.
Exactly. So maybe the real key to unlocking the true power of sleep isn't about sleeping less. Maybe it's about understanding and optimizing all those different stages.
It's like fine tuning this complex instrument. You have to make sure each string is perfectly tuned so you can create this harmonious symphony of sleep.
I love that analogy. And thankfully, we already have some really cool developments in sleep technology that are helping us do just that. Sleep tracking devices, personalized sleep interventions, all that stuff. We're moving past that one-size-fits-all approach to sleep and embracing this more personalized, nuanced understanding of sleep.
It's like we're on the verge of a sleep revolution. It's so exciting to imagine where all this might lead us. But even with all these possibilities, I think it's important to remember that some things about sleep will probably always remain a mystery.
Oh, absolutely. We still have so much to learn about how the sleeping brain works, what each sleep stage does, and just how deeply sleep impacts our physical and mental health.
It's pretty humbling to think that we spend a third of our lives doing this one thing,
Yeah.
and we still have so much to discover about it.
It's like exploring an uncharted territory within ourselves. It's this whole hidden universe that we're just starting to explore.
Speaking of exploring, I remember a comment from someone who compared this whole quest to reduce sleep to the science fiction novel Beggars in Spain. Have you read it?
I have, yeah. It's a really thought-provoking story. It explores what would happen if we lived in a world where some people are genetically engineered to not need any sleep. They basically become this new elite class, the sleepless, with these enhanced abilities and seemingly limitless potential. It's a really interesting look at social equality, the value of sleep, and what it really means to be human.
Wow, that sounds super relevant to our conversation. It makes you think that even with the most amazing scientific advancements, we can't ignore the ethical and societal
You're
implications.
so right. It's crucial that we have these conversations at the same time as we're making scientific progress. We have to make sure that any advancements in sleep technology are used responsibly and ethically.
It's all about balance, right? Embracing the possibilities, but also carefully considering what could go wrong.
Exactly. And that's where I think the experiences of those who are already living with shorter sleep can be so valuable. Let's dive into some of those stories and see what they can teach us.
It's pretty wild to imagine a world where some people don't need sleep at all, like in that science fiction book. It makes you wonder if we're actually getting close to something like that in real life.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think. And it brings us back to those personal stories, like that commenter who talked about trying to like hack their sleep back in college. They were pushing themselves to get by on barely any sleep just so they could have more time for socializing and gaming and all that.
Oh, yeah, right. The one who said they're kind of paying for it now.
Exactly. They were saying they're having trouble sleeping these days.
Yeah.
Juggling a demanding job and little kids who aren't sleeping through the night.
Oh, man, that's rough. It's like the classic story of burning the candle at both ends. We always think we're invincible when we're young, but our bodies always seem to catch up with us eventually.
It's so true. Sleep debt is a real thing, and it can build up over time and cause all sorts of problems down the road. We might feel like we're getting away with it at the time, but those sleepless nights always seem to catch up to us.
Yeah, it's like we're borrowing time from our future selves and we end up having to pay it back with interest. But sometimes people don't really have a choice, right? Like we had that listener who wrote in about those overnight deployments, working like 12, 14-hour days. I can't even imagine trying to function on that little sleep.
It's incredible, isn't it? The things people do. It really shows you how dedicated and resilient people are, especially in those professions like healthcare, emergency services, the military. They're constantly putting their own sleep needs aside to help others. But it also makes you worry about what that kind of chronic sleep deprivation is doing to them long term.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that's where the idea of engineered sleep gets really interesting, you know? Like, what if we could come up with safe and effective ways to help people function at their best, even when they're totally sleep deprived? What if we could minimize the negative effects of those unavoidable sleepless nights?
That would be incredible, wouldn't it? Just
Yeah.
imagine. First responders can power through a whole crazy shift without experiencing any of that mental fog or exhaustion that usually comes with sleep loss. Or new parents could make it through those first few months without feeling like total zombies.
It would be amazing. It could change everything, not just for individual well-being, but for safety and performance in all kinds of professions. And it's not about getting rid of sleep altogether. It's just about making us more resilient, more able to handle those sleep challenges that life throws at us.
Exactly. It's about maximizing our ability to function at a high level and stay safe no matter what's going on around us. And that brings us back to that question we keep coming back to. What's the real value of sleep?
It's a big question, and I don't think the answer is as simple as just counting how many hours we sleep. Like we were talking about before, the quality of our sleep is a huge part of it, too.
You got it. We've talked a lot about sleep quality, the different stages of sleep, how all those stages contribute to our overall health and well-being. It's not just one thing.
It's like sleep is this multifaceted gem, and each part of it plays this critical role in creating this whole that's way more than just the sum of its parts.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. And there's still so much we don't know about this gem of ours. Sleep science is constantly evolving, so who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting for us.
It really feels like we're just starting to scratch the surface, uncovering all these new things about this essential part of our lives. And maybe someday we'll figure out how to engineer sleep in a way that helps everyone, not just people who have trouble sleeping, but also those who are dealing with extreme sleep deprivation.
It would be incredible. A future where we've truly mastered the art of sleep. We could optimize it for health, performance, well-being, all of it. It's definitely something worth working towards. But in the meantime, we don't have to wait for some big scientific breakthrough to improve our own sleep, right? There's a lot we can do today.
Exactly. We can make sleep a priority, learn about our individual needs, and build healthy habits around sleep. It's about taking charge of our sleep and realizing how important it is for our physical and mental health, our emotional well-being, all of it.
I couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope everyone listening has gained a new appreciation for sleep and all its mysteries.
It's been amazing exploring the world of engineered sleep with you. We've covered so much, from the inner workings of our genes to the potential for unlocking even more human potential. And who knows, maybe years from now, we'll look back at this conversation and think, wow, we were there at the very beginning of a sleep revolution.
That would be something. A world where we finally crack the code of sleep and use it to make our lives better. It's definitely a dream worth having.
For sure. But for now, we'll leave you with this. Sleep well, dream big, and never stop exploring those mysteries within.
Until next time,
Yeah.
sweet
Really?
dreams.